Hello, my friends. Welcome to Fear and Trembling with Horror, the podcast that brings all things horror into conversation with philosophy, theology, religion, literature, just all the stuff of life. I'm one of your hosts, Jared, and I'm joined with my good pal, Ryan. Now, the basis of our friendship, as we say every week, started over discussing horror films in our dorm room in college far too long ago to admit. Every Thursday night, we would share one of our favorites with each other and order pizza, and it began a lifelong conversation about the meaning of horror uh, and how it could be valuable to society, especially when people are sometimes repulsed by it. And on today's episode, we have a film that many people were repulsed by. People were excited by all the hoopla surrounding it when it was coming out through the trailers and the promise that it was the scariest film since The Exorcist. And I'll admit that it came out in 2018, and when it did, I did not watch it. I was in kind of a dark headspace, and I heard it was a bit disturbing, so I passed on that. And then we entered the pandemic, and I didn't want to watch anything that was disturbing. So I just now have gotten to it, and I found it quite exceptional. So without further ado, today's episode, we're looking at the film called Hereditary. How you doing, Ryan?
Yes, I'm doing well. I had the fortunate privilege of seeing this movie early. I got to see it
Humble
as
brag.
part
Humble
of a
brag.
yeah, humble brag. I got to see this movie as part of a reviewing films for a website. It was a Christian website. So they review every film and they have their own rating system, blah blah blah. I'm not going to get into the boring details of that, but it did not disappoint. I knew virtually nothing going into this film and had no expectation beyond it was just a scary movie, and I walked out. It was scary and very tenseful at times, but I walked out mostly disturbed. And so mission accomplished.
Yeah, with big stars like Tony Collette and Gabriel Byrne, this wasn't going to be some B-level film. It's certainly been compared to movies like The Witch, newer horror films that are really done artfully and the story told really, really well. If you've seen the film, you'll know that there is the play between the house that the characters live in, the Graham family, and these little miniatures, these dioramas, these pieces of art that the main character, played by Toni Collette, Annie, she paints and designs these little vignettes, these little doll houses, these whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
and they're miniatures. So she has some control over what's going on inside. She's like taking looks and creating tableaus of her past life. Well, the house itself, I'm told, was built as a set all together, as a unique facility with walls that could be removed,
Hmm.
so the camera could kind of play in the room in particular ways, so that it was just like peering into this diorama or this dollhouse, but only for the actors. So it's on a larger
Yeah.
scale what you see Toni Collette's character doing on a very small scale with her miniatures. And the cinematography, I called it austere because it's to me it resists a lot of flashiness. There's a lot of images when you look at the camera and you look at the composition. There's a lot of square framing. It's kind of stark.
Hmm.
It's set back, especially before things go haywire.
Yeah, yeah,
It,
yeah.
it
Don't. Hey, you're doing the teasing now.
oh yes, well it's a horror film. It's gonna go sideways, silly. At any rate, before it does that, it frames the characters usually in a fairly noble set, square, right angles, that kind of thing. And then when things go haywire, that's when you start seeing the strange angles, and sometimes you get a little more
Yeah.
claustrophobic look or view, kind of an expressionistic turn there. But at any rate, very, very good film. We're going to do a little overview of it. As I already intimated, this is about the Graham family. Starts off at
Yeah.
a funeral, doesn't it, Ryan?
It does. To kind of piggyback off of your opening statement, the way that this house, the film actually opens on the treehouse, and that's a bit of a foreboding image. when we get to the end, and now it's my turn to tease. Um, but that's the opening shot. And you always want to pay attention to opening and closing shots as they often mirror each other. But in this particular shot, it starts with the picture of the treehouse, and then the camera, as you say, it's very, very calculated and intentional, the movement, and it moves in from the treehouse into the bedroom and then over towards the miniature, and then it pushes in on the miniature and it becomes the real house. And so I'm sure we could talk a little bit about kind of what's going on there. And I do like what you had to say about how she builds miniatures to control or to try and gain control over traumas that she's experienced in the
Yeah, I
past.
didn't say that on air, buddy. I told you that on the phone earlier today.
No, you just said it.
No, I didn't. Okay, maybe I did. Who knows? It's late when we're doing this. So yeah, from
Yes.
the treehouse of horror in the backyard, right, to
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
horror that is the human-sized dollhouse, because that's what it is. And really, this
for sure.
story, the question has been posed: is hereditary? Are we talking about passing down the family genes of mental health and trauma, or are we talking
Hmm.
about how evil is hereditary, or is it both? And
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull punches. I'm just going to tell you straight up from word go. I do believe that this is a horror film that is using the concept of horror to really talk about the question of trauma in families, mental health,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the trauma that gets passed on from one to another. Family systems. I think it is an inversion of
Yeah.
the family overcoming. And I think this is about the family devolving into chaos. I think there's paranoia at play. I mean, this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the whole concept of the family being like a large version of the diorama means that somebody, something, some force is trying to control them. It's got a
Hmm.
bit of it could play right into a narrative of uh, what are they called, those conspiracy theory. And that's one of those things.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories work in the world because they give people a feeling of control when things don't seem like they're control in control.
Like there is
Right, yeah,
control. Yeah.
it's kind of a strangely cathartic kind of thing to have a conspiracy theory. Well, this family could you could really give them a pass for believing that there's conspiracy against them, because there was. And it's a
Well,
coven, if
yeah.
you will, a gathering of a cult that is interested in their bloodline, in their heredity.
Well, yeah, in their in their bloodline, in the matriarchy that was the mother, ultimately, and it's interesting that there is, from the time that there's some foreboding going on throughout the entire what I'd say the first leading up to the final act, right? In the first two acts, it really does play well to, is there something psychological going on? Are we looking at mental illness? Or is there really something other? Is there something else, like you said, this force, supernatural, whatever? That element doesn't get introduced into it until the friend does the seance. We'll get there.
Yeah,
But
let's
it
good.
does a
Let's good, because
master.
I feel like I mean, I mentioned funeral, and we didn't talk anything about it.
Yeah.
So at the very beginning, Toni Collette's character Annie is speaking at her mother's funeral. A couple things you note: she's estranged, or has been estranged from her mom, and only in these last years, in her mom's dementia, has she
Hmm.
been around the family. There's a strange symbol on the necklace of the grandmother, the one in
Yeah.
the casket. And Toni Collette's character, and he says, I see a lot of faces I've never seen before. And there's not a ton of people
Yeah.
there, so that's telling. That's to tip us all off to the fact that there are people in and around your mother's life that you don't know about, that we're going to know about by the end of the story, right?
Yeah. They're going to play somehow into that.
Yeah, and so she's suffering. She's suffering grief of a lost mother. But as the film really begins, actually before that Treehouse of Horror film shot, there's an obituary, and you get to read the
Yep.
obituary, and it
Yep. Yep.
says, her basically her mother's deceased, and she was predeceased. Her husband predeceased her, and then her eldest son, her eldest child, died, and
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of get this sense just from reading the obituary that there's something strange that's been following this little clan, and
Yeah.
I wonder where the victimhood lies. Well, here's Tony
Well,
Collette,
and
Annie's
get
character.
ready for the despair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get ready.
Dis-
Annie's
Despair follows.
yeah, Annie's character. She goes home. It's a beautiful home. She's this diorama artist. Her husband seems like the only normal cat in the whole flick, played by the incomparable Gabriel Byrne, and he's a
Mm-hmm.
psychologist or a psychiatrist, and everything's just kind of like odd in the family, kind of cold. Of course, you know that you're living in the wake of a funeral. That's the trauma, the grief, that's real,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and through time, things start happening strangely in the home. Um, you find out a couple things. You find out that there's an older son that she has, that when she had the older son, she was estranged from her mother and would not let her mother be around this baby when he was a child. And now he's just kind of a
Be in her life.
yeah,
Yeah.
and now he's just kind of a a pot smoking high school boy who is interested in girls, and that's that's how he
Yeah.
copes with his life. And then there's this little girl named Charlie, and she's there's just no way about it, other way about it than to call her straight up strange. She
Straight up
straight up
strange. Yeah.
strange. People are strange when they're
Great song, by
strangers.
the way. Fantastic
Yeah,
song.
it sounds like something kind of creepy at a carnival, I think. Anyway, so this little girl Charlie, she clicks more than talks. She'll make a noise. And I read somewhere that people think that that was because she was coping with the inability to communicate or express herself. Um,
Mm,
she draws. She's inwardly focused. She sees
yeah.
everything. She's the one who sees the first glimmer of blue light that goes through a hallway. That comes
Mm-hmm.
about later. We find out later that this is a demonic spirit that's plaguing the situation. But she's the first to
Yeah.
see it. And then she has this weird hobby. Why don't you tell us if you can? If I'm teeing you up right, Ryan, what is her strange little hobby?
Well, her strange little hobby is, she collects things and symbols. Most disturbingly, she collects the head of a dead bird and carries that around. And I think the things that really tease up the strangeness of Charlie is the mother's admission in the group therapy session, where we get all the backstory of the trauma that she's had in her familial life.
All right, so
And when
Annie,
she
the
says,
mother, has got to go to group
yes,
therapy for trauma,
yeah,
and she's got this weird little kid that likes to cut off the heads off things. There's more I wanted to say, but you go ahead and go right on
yeah.
into that.
Well, so she's different, and the thing that I bring this up, and I do want to come back to this particular scene, but it shows that Annie feels responsible that she let her mother get her claws into Charlie. And she says something to that effect, that she kept her mother away from her first son, but then with her daughter, Charlie, she let her mother back in, and she wished that she wouldn't have done that. Because that, the weirdness or the oddness that you see in Charlie, I think comes from the grandmother that, I think you're going to find out, the different symbols and the different things. I think, is that what you're talking about as far as like teeing up her weirdness? She seems to be drawn to those things that her grandmother was drawn to.
Yeah, well, here's how I understand it. So you got this little weird kid, and she was cared for by her grandmother. In fact, we find out along the way that she was breastfed some by her grandmother. Her grandmother was obsessed with feeding
Ew.
her, and but you also find out she has a nut allergy, and they only do that in the movie to set
Mm-hmm.
up something later to come. And
That's right.
well, quite oddly, the older son, not this isn't odd, the older son wants to go to a party, high school party. And the mom's like, "You're going to be doing drugs? You're going to be drinking?" You know?
You're going to be drinking?
Yeah, no, mom, they don't have that. It's kind
Yeah.
of mundane. And so can I take the car? And then she goes, "Well, take your little sister." Like, and that's the weirdest bit. It's kind of like,
The weirdest,
yeah, why
yes,
would
the
you
weirdest
ever
thing.
include this kid of this age in
Right.
a high school party. Another thing, by the way, that Charlie does say is that Grandma always wanted me to be a boy, and I should note that. And then they
Mm,
treat her like a
mm-hmm.
boy, and she's very tomboyish, and that's a whole thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
so she
Yeah.
goes with her big brother, and they're at this high school party, and he's got quote unquote good pot, so he goes off to smoke it with some girl he wants to.
Well, the girl
Yeah,
that he
he's trying
likes.
to be Lothario, swing and a miss,
Yeah.
swing and
Yeah.
a miss.
Mm,
And so, but he's like, "Hey, have a piece of chocolate cake," because at every high school teenage party, someone's made chocolate cake. And there's
yeah.
this scene where
Yeah.
you see someone cutting up the walnuts with a knife. So it's connecting all these
Hmm.
dots, and as soon as she eats it, she busts in the room where her brother's smoking pot. And she says, "My throat is closing." And it's the only tender moment in the family that I've seen is that he runs her to the car and she's hugging him, holding on to him in
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah.
And she's in the back of the car, gasping and freaking out. And as the car speeds down the one-way road, the only way in or out of this place, the young man, his name is Peter. He sees a dead
Peter.
animal carcass and he swerves. Now Charlie, the little sister, has since stuck her head out the window trying to get air in, and as
Yeah.
he swerves into a pole and she is decapitated. It is
It's a terrible scene.
absolutely gruesome. But what you
It
have
is.
to know is the same symbol that is discovered. It's on the necklace of the grandmother she lays in her coffin. It's discovered in areas around the house. It's discovered in other characters' homes. It's on that
Mm-hmm.
pole
Mm-hmm.
before they drive by, and so the symbol is going to be
Mm, mm.
important. Of course, Peter, he's in like a terrible
Yeah.
catatonic fugue, almost a fugue state. Comes home and in another odd move just leaves his sister. His body doesn't say anything until in the next morning.
Just lays down like I can't.
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't sleep. Just lays. I mean, I don't know how she would respond. Like, because I think, like you said, it was like one of the few genuine moments of connection that you see between this family, at least physical touch. That he genuinely was concerned for her well being.
yeah.
And then that happens, and you're just like, holy crap! Like, I mean, I remember sitting in the theater, like, where it's a tense moment because of the reaction, and just everything that's gone on to that point. And then when he swerves to miss that animal, like she's hanging out the window. You just didn't I didn't expect to see it happen.
Yeah, I was like, I
I,
like paused it and
I
went
was
on a
just
walk. I think.
I was just like, holy crap.
Yeah,
Like, did that just happen? And then I think probably the truest moment to me in the film, and I think this kind of encapsulated the entire film for me. Everything that happened after this, I'm just like, okay, it's a horror film. I get it. It's part of the story. But whenever Annie the mom is on her knees just crying, and she is being held by her husband, but we're not allowed to feel that. Like, the camera stays at a distance, and I think intentionally so. Like, we see her just despair. Like, that is the picture of despair. She's like, I want to die
yeah.
because I feel dead. I want to be dead.
Yeah, and she
And
goes and she even sleeps in the treehouse of horror
yeah,
and just lays on the floor in front of a heater. Now, okay, before we get
yeah.
to the information about all these, and that's a good read of that shot. That is, and you're right, it's a
I mean,
profoundly emotional shot.
it is like the emotional heart of this movie where you're just screaming into the nothingness that is despair that follows any type of death or any type of loss. Like, if you don't feel that for people who are close to you, I'm talking about beyond just the hope of whatever religious belief you may have, but just that loss and separation, of not just loss and separation, but a tragic loss and separation. Like, that I felt that in my being.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So
Anyway,
yeah, and religious belief will play a part in this, although it's the inversion of what you think of when you think of religion. But that's more to come with the
sure.
symbol talk. Let's
Yeah.
go back.
Yeah.
Let's go back and look at Annie again and listen to some of the things that she has said about her family up till this point. Besides the fact that her mom breastfed the kid. Besides the fact that
Yeah.
she let her mom in, she stayed in the home with them.
Yeah.
When she goes in this grief share kind of group, she
Hmm.
loses it a
Hmm.
little on a speech about what's going on with her.
Almost. Yeah.
And what does she tell everybody? She tells everybody what happens in what her family trauma is.
Yeah, yeah. So she basically is kind of letting people in on like her emotional state, right? Of why she's there at the, while she's there at the party. And the camera work in this scene is amazing because right whenever she starts to talk, the camera, like as the group says, "Hi, Annie," it starts its slow push in, and it pushes all the way in as she tells the story of her mother and her. What did she have? She had, and I wrote it down. Um, it
Dementia,
was the. Yeah, well, no, it was something worse than dementia. It was
DID.
DID, yes. DID and
I didn't know
um,
what that was.
so dissociative identity disorder.
Oh,
So it is a severe mental illness plus dementia, right? That's what she was diagnosed with. So that's like the first right hook, right? And the camera continues to like push in slowly. And then she talks about her father, who tragically starved himself to death because he had psychotic depression, right? It's a severe form of depression, and as if that wasn't bad enough, before you see any reaction from anybody else in the group, that further pushes in still, and it talks about her brother who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he hung himself and blamed his mother for, quote, putting people inside him, end quote. And then the camera stops, and then it cuts away to the reverse shot of everybody in the circle just like looking at her. Like, if there was a pregnant silence ever, this would be it.
yes, and the
Like,
baby that it will birth will be a
they just
king of
didn't,
hell.
yeah, they just didn't
Right.
know how to react to her.
What's
And
yeah, and what you find out is that Annie has some of these same mental health disorders or touches of
yeah,
them, and so she's like,
well, and once she starts to talk then more about her own experience and her daughter and her family, the camera starts to pull out. And again, it's this distancing that's happening so that the audience can't like over identify with the pain that she feels these emotions in.
yeah, she's almost
Um
like an unreliable narrator.
yeah,
Later,
yeah.
later, you find out that she sleepwalks, and she's telling this
Mhm.
to somebody who is a bad actor, acting as if they were her friend. But she tells them that
Right.
as she sleepwalked, she had all this basically a fire, like some gasoline or kerosene or some.
It's covered everybody in
Yeah, and
gasoline,
herself, and then
and
lit a match, and then her son woke up, and she talked about her son is,
she woke up.
yeah, her son is still angry with her about this, but she's like, but I blew it out. It was just my dreaming. So yeah, she's got some significant
Yeah.
disorders, and the rippling effect of those, I would say those mental health challenges untreated and the
Hmm.
trauma caused it's like that ripple of a rock in a pond. It just kind of keeps
Yeah.
seeping out, touching every web of connection in the family. The
Everything,
whole network
because
gets
the whole network,
it,
because what you said is right. As that camera pulls out and she starts to tell about her relationship with her mother, how it was on again, off again, and her husband had to put together a no contact rule, but then that ended whenever she had to move in with them. Like, she moved in with them whenever she got, quote, dementia, right? And the camera makes it seem like there's something a little off about her as that would you say the trustworthy narrator.
no, it's untrustworthy.
Untrustworthy, right? Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, she's not quite trustworthy in terms of, hey, can we really believe
Right.
everything that she's
All
saying?
right,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna speed us up. So that's the mental health component. That's the kind of the genetic kind of stuff being passed along that you can see that sometimes Sometimes this stuff has its bad impact in a family. Sometimes, and thank God when it is, it's really treated well, and people are,
Hmm.
on the path of some sort of health and recovery. This You see all that, but then you start seeing, of course, because it's a horror film, the scenes of the horrific,
Of
and
course.
there are these moments where I mean, the way they play with light is about as brilliant as the original John Carpenter's Halloween, where you
Hmm.
have like Annie can look over and see her mother dead and naked, very faintly, and if you just
Yeah.
blink, you miss
Yeah.
it. Light comes on, she's gone. That happens all throughout
Right.
the house. There are even other
Yeah.
things.
Charlie saw her grandmother a lot
There's other things,
prior
yeah.
to her
There's other
death.
things that happen. There's while they're downstairs. There's footsteps up in the attic. There's just things
Hmm.
going
Hmm.
on that they don't even comment on. Paint starts getting knocked over on its own. Okay, so the eardy beardy, the weird, creepy stuff is happening in their world, and more stuff is found of the grandmother's, her artifacts, her
Of the
personal items,
grandmothers. Yeah.
and in them you start noticing some very occultish type stuff. A lot of that symbol comes up, and what you
Yeah.
soon discover through all of it is that her grandmother was basically the leader of some cult that worshipped and wanted to summon a king, one of the kings of hell named Payman. And this is
Yeah.
actually a real god in demonology. He's written of in what's called a grimoire, and these are these ancient, usually ancient and all the way to medieval, like magical texts. The books themselves are about
Hmm.
rituals and magic, and very little associated. He is considered a theological villain, although he's not in traditional theological texts like the Holy Bible, New or Old Testament, the
Right.
pseudepigrapha, the apocrypha, or any
The
midrashic material.
Apocrypha. Yeah.
It's from occultic sources. A lot of times, this character is associated with King Solomon, and there's all kinds of
Hmm.
stuff. But the bottom line is, in some paintings, he's always got uh, severed heads with him, and so seems like if you want to pay homage to this king of hell, who,
All right.
and it doesn't mean he's the king. He's not the Lucifer, the Satan.
Right.
This is
Just a
yeah,
prince.
he's one of nine kings, and he.
Oh, one of the nine
Yes, and
kings.
he basically you offer him a head. Here's a head. What's your here's your head. What's your hurry? Um,
Here's your head and a male
but
child. Possess me.
you might remember that Charlie lost her head, and
Yes.
so okay, so I'm gonna try to get this clear and quick.
Mm.
The mother, Annie, she tries to go to another grief counseling session, and however, she does not want to go into it because she's just things are just messed up. But there's this
Yeah.
woman who shows up out of the blue, and this woman, she plays in all kinds of films. She plays in The Leftovers on HBO. She plays in Handmaid's Tale. She's
Mm.
always in a kind of a creepy character. And
Yeah. See, I knew none of that going into it,
well,
so
you have to
I
you
didn't
have
really.
to be cultured like me.
Yeah. I'm an uncultured swine. I knew whenever I said I knew nothing about seeing this film the first time. I knew
All
nothing.
right,
Like I knew who Gabriel Byrne
hey,
was, and I'm like, ooh, I know
hey, I'm gonna
him.
interrupt you. Scroll down because we're sharing a screen, everybody, so we can get the characters' names and actors right. I want to find her name
Mm.
because it's Ann Dowd. Ann Dowd plays Joan.
Joan
Yes,
and
yeah,
Dowd.
she's
Yep.
yeah, she's a phenomenal actress. But she she's like, oh, come on, let's go talk. And then she goes, hey, I lost my son too. And then
Son and grandson.
yeah, and grandson. She tells the story. Well,
Yeah.
whenever Annie gets invited to her place. She goes to her place. She sees a rug, a mat, a welcome mat. She's like, "Hey, that's the kind that my mom used to weave." Tips you off right now that this might be one of those people that knew my mom. And as she goes in,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
again more of those symbols for this god, this
Yeah.
character of hell, and there are other words and symbols out of this kind of esoteric occult literature all over the place. I'm not going to go down them because that's not really the point. But the
Yeah.
point is it's all over there for you to see if you happen to take notice. As Annie is served a cup of tea, she kind of sees something bitter and touches it to her lip, and there's a piece of black spice or black tea, and she kind of flicks it away. it's signaled to us because several different times this kind of tea is being utilized for something, right? And later, what we're finding out is that what's actually happening to the Graham family is that they are the playthings of this cult. They
Mm-hmm.
actually want to use the family and their bloodline as a continual and constant gift to this demon king. And you find out that what you might have suspected before, that Charlie's death was not accidental, it was planned, and they offer Charlie's head. It appears, Ryan, that Charlie was Payman earlier on. That's probably why Charlie was so weird. But Payman
Mm-hmm.
needs the body of a male. The grandmother who's
Mm-hmm.
dead, it said that her eldest son had died by suicide. He was schizophrenic, remember? He was angry at his
Yep.
mom for
Yep. Yep.
putting all these people into him. They think that
Yeah.
this has to do with the fact that she was trying to offer him as a sacrifice to Payman, so that Payman could
Mm-hmm.
become, incarnated in his body, and he ended his own
Yes.
life. Bottom line is that the eldest son was most likely, an offering to this god to come and live, but he took his own life,
Mm-hmm.
and so now the grandmother's desperately working on her granddaughter,
Yeah.
setting up this elaborate plot to have her be allergic to nuts, to have her die, to be a sacrifice, to have it all
Yeah.
planned out and set up so that this would happen. And what you know about
Yeah.
Payman is that Payman is a male king of hell with a feminine face, and at this
Mm.
point in time, it goes crazy. It goes from eerie to sideways bat crap crazy.
Quick, very
The
quickly.
mom's losing her mind. She's
Yeah.
seen trying to
Yeah.
pull the head off her son in her sleep, like she's sleepwalking. She's under the allure of something.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess it was her hands. I mean, she was under the bed somehow or behind the bed somehow, and then she was over by the window when he woke
Well, there's
up,
this
and
theory that
like,
Payman has entered her into some way after her daughter's died. She's been
hmm
sleeping in her daughter's creepy ass
well,
treehouse.
and certainly after she does the séance the first
Yes,
time,
I
and
forgot
she
to say
reads
that
the
that's the door.
yeah
The door is.
yeah, and reading a language that you don't know what it is or where it comes from. Note to listeners, don't do that. If it's an ancient language that you don't know what it is, don't read it.
I mean, I guess if you believe
Anyway,
such things, but
all right.
that's the thing is, yeah, Joan is the name of Anne Dowd's character, who's she was basically the second in command of the cult under the grandmother, and she's the one who suggests there when they're having that cup of bitter tea. Hey, one thing that I've done to assuage my guilt or to help my guilt is to have a seance, and I get to talk to my loved ones. And Annie, who's just desperate, she goes along with it, and she leads in this seance, which is the opening door to this demon king, once and for all. If it was only a foothold or a toe in the door, now the door's wide open,
Now the door is wide
and
open.
she becomes something else. Now she's obsessed herself with this spirit that's going on in the home, and so she tries to tell her husband, "Look at this book. I tried to burn this book. It burned my arm." And he's like, "You're kind of being crazy." Like, and in fact, in kind of the argument, the body of Annie's mom, the deceased, the head of this cult, is
Yeah,
discovered in the attic. And he freaks
yeah,
out because earlier in the film, he's got his phone call saying, "Hey, somebody's desecrated the grave." And now he's like,
right,
"It was my wife." He thought it might have been just some kids, but now it was my
right.
wife. And she's just
And she has
losing
no
it.
recollection of that. Yeah,
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 he's a psychiatrist. She's lost it. And she goes, "No, look at this book. This is Charlie's book. I tried to burn it and it burned my arm." And he gets kind of angry. He takes it and he throws it in the fire, and it just lights him on fire.
on fire.
The
Yeah,
only seemingly normalish person of the lot. A person
yeah,
who's not,
yeah.
his actual bloodline is not tied to a crazy cult and conspiracy to use other family members as
Well, and it
pawns.
really what it does do for me is it kind of reframed for me the father starving himself to death because of his deep depression.
Say more.
You know, well, it's, you know, like he had to be sacrificed as well. You know, to bring about this ninth, one of the nine kings of hell.
Somehow
It has to be
his wife.
somehow it has to be a total sacrifice. That
Yeah.
the father has to be sacrificed as well.
Now, why would people sacrifice for this demon king, as I like to call him? And the idea is that there's a promise of riches. And
Yes, always riches, isn't it?
well, you know, here's the interesting thing about it. You could ask yourself this question about whether or not wealth would be enough for you to sacrifice your family. And you know, I have a segment of my family that there was a person in it who saw the opportunity for financial gain from, you know, one of our great grandparents passed, and then there was this trust, and it was known that a certain amount of money went to a certain amount of people in the family, and then there was this person jockeyed. The maternal person jockeyed over her children for the money.
Position, yeah.
And the bottom line is so much pain and heartache was done. It was in a sense a sacrifice of the loved ones of the family bond for the sake of greater wealth.
Well, and it's interesting that
It happens, is what I'm saying.
yeah, it happens, and it, to that point that it happens for a purpose. You know, Annie discovers something in one of her mother's books early on in the film before things go
Sideways.
batshit crazy. And it said that the handwritten note, the camera focuses on it for quite a while. Now, I paused the screen so I could read it, but I didn't have to.
Because you're a slow reader.
Well, the camera. Oh, I was worried that it was going to cut away.
Just say you're a slow reader.
I'm a slow reader.
That's your penance for losing our feed earlier.
It's my penance.
I'm kidding. You're fine.
Son of a. Anyway.
You're fine.
Yeah, and so this letter says that don't worry, everything's going to be okay. All the sacrifice is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, what's she talking about? You know, and at that point, you still don't really have an idea of the things that are going to happen.
Right. Anybody could say that to you, right?
Yeah, and
you know, I could if I were to die and I left a note to you saying, Ryan, don't worry, all the sacrifice will be worth it. You could be like, oh, there's my buddy Jared inspiring me to, you know, to live a life that I'm trying to reach for things.
Right.
Not this. Not decapitating children and other people so that a demon king can come in and give us unlimited money to McDonald's forever.
Believe me when I tell you, I did not see that coming.
Nobody
spoiler
did.
alert.
She
spoiler
did.
alert.
Charlie saw it coming right as it hit her right in the face. I mean, it was awful. I can't even watch that again.
Holy crap, man. You know, and it's sad. Did she know that she was the sacrifice? Did she know that she was going to have to lose her head?
I don't know why she cut off the head of a bird.
Well, but it was part of that ritualistic activity that she was tied up with her grandma. I think she had some inkling, you know, with the premonitions that she saw of her after her death, that there was something going on and that she had a part to play. Now, did she know she was going to bounce her head off a telephone pole? Probably not. But yeah, it's just all very tragic. And then you get to the end and you see all the family members sacrificed by this cult, except for the male child with a feminine face.
Well, after the husband is burned up and then the older child is asleep. Now Annie has fully been taken over by Payman, and she starts doing that creepy horror film stuff where she's like climbing up walls like backwards and barely in the light and in the shadow. And
this film does a phenomenal job.
It's fantastic
of light and shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
cannot say enough about it.
No.
Because what you actually see is very little. I mean, the head thing notwithstanding, you see very little, and it's all just left to the imagination, more or less.
Yeah.
So she's up in the corner of a room, just staring, watching the son sleep. And we all know that only lunatics watch other people sleep. And he gets up and starts looking around the house, and then he sees his burnt-up dad, and he stands there, and she's like in that corner of that room too, and then comes down, starts chasing him, and it's like crazy. And he gets away. He gets up in the attic. Now, remember, there's a dead corpse up there.
There's a body
corpse.
up there. Yeah.
Yes. And as he closes it, now she's like floating she's like hanging onto the ceiling, like she's on her hands and knees, but she's upside down, and her head is just banging on the door, and it's like just psychotically, it's completely manic, completely possessed, and the image of it is so affecting that I can see it, and I'm like, it makes you shudder, and good luck sleeping tonight thinking about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, while he's up there,
tough.
he looks around. There's a bunch of naked folks in the shadows, and these are the cult people who are basically. So much of this reminds me of The Simpsons. We get the Treehouse of Horror, and then there's in one Treehouse of Horror, you have Bart's evil twin who's been living in the attic for years, and no one really knew he was there. Well, the cult people snuck up in the attic, and no one knew they were there to lay around naked and do whatever that they do.
Yeah.
But they're up there, and they all kind of come out with these eerie smiles, like, "Hi, how's it going? Would you like to be part of my pyramid scheme? All you got to do is lose your head."
Here's your pretty feminine face.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about it. He just launches himself out the window to his death in the bed of flowers. Hey, so like Bon Jovi, he was laid in a bed of
roses.
But sweet relief because he's going to die. But that blue light that Charlie saw earlier on that we see in other times, it represents the Demon King. It comes over him, and now he's possessed.
Yeah.
And he walks into the creepy Treehouse of Horror, and there is his decapitated grandmother, decapitated mother,
father.
Oh, by the way, how the mother Annie decapitates herself.
Yeah.
Is with a piano wire, and she's just like staring at him. Toni Collette can make some very strange faces, and it is
very
like
strange faces,
very scary. And she's just back and forth until her head goes, and it's like, that's another one that it took a sick imagination to come up with. But and then Charlie's up, and then there's the naked cult people around, and they're kneeling in worship in a triangular formation, and there are symbols of the triangle throughout, and a lot of commentators think this has to do with the Holy Trinity of Christianity, but inverted.
Yep, that's how I read it initially.
And then they're in front of this sort of kingly looking built character that has the head of Charlie. So it's a male body with his feminine face, and there's a crown on its head.
Yeah. A fully embodied one of the 9 princes of hell.
And then what happens?
I forget.
Well, the question posed, what does it mean? Does it mean was it all just a metaphor? I mean, because now this king has entry. I mean, he doesn't have gold, and he doesn't bring money to the worshipers. He's just there in Peter, right? So people have asked this question. The writer, the director of the film said, no, this is not just just a metaphor for mental health. Like, we didn't just it is about mental health. Sure. But it's a horror film. So that's something that happens in the story.
Yeah, no, I think that is the one way you have to read the film, is that now that Paimon is physically embodied. That the ritual was successful, and they did successfully bring, one of the princes of hell into the world. And what does that mean? There's many implications, like you said, the inversion of the Holy Trinity, and is this desire for the demonic to mirror, the divine.
Which, I mean, technically
always
speaking,
mirroring, right? Copying.
Yeah, I mean, for the listeners who not really familiar with too much of occult stuff, the Church of Satan, the relatively modern invention. We all know it. We all heard of Anton LaVeyan Satanism. There's other branches. It came out of the counterculture, and he was a creepy dude.
You mean even Satanists are divided? Oh, me.
They got angry at the potluck dinner over the worship music they were using.
The carpet didn't match the drapes.
Right, exactly. I don't like the color we chose for the pews.
Right.
No.
It's the wrong shade of red, you asshole.
In all seriousness, though, there's a lot of influence from Aleister Crowley and other, kind of late modern occultists. But Anton LaVey's Satanic Church really focuses on this kind of notion of do what you will do. It's to free yourself from the way you could interpret it is to free yourself from the constraints of some like sky deity. And there's always
Right.
a really, really reductionistic way of understanding God. What they reject as God, I do too. That's
Right. Right.
well, most
Shh, don't tell
atheists,
anyone.
yeah, the God that atheists don't believe in, I really don't either, and I don't believe in the God that a lot of Christians believe in. I just think that,
Ooh, that's a whole nother episode, friend.
yeah, well, I mean, I just think that people
Yeah,
really have,
for sure.
because they wanted to go so simple about it, they have
Well, I think that's part
they
of the
made God in their own image.
commentary.
But
Yeah.
okay, but anyway, here it's neither here nor there right now.
Ooh, made God in their own
And so then
image.
there's this do what you want to do to fulfill yourself, right? And then and, some versions are it's kind of like whatever. It's kind of maybe a little hedonistic. So in some ways that's kind of an inversion of Christianity, which is supposed to be exemplified in self-sacrificial giving of love for the other,
For the other, yeah.
or there's a mass, and then in the Satanic Church there's a black mass. Everything's like, again, an inversion and a turning, kind of a mockery of what predominantly in Western culture is considered the holy. And
Right.
and so yes, this is a religious group. Yes, there's a devotion, but it is it's an inversion. And what's the purpose of it? It's not self-sacrificial
No.
giving, it's
No.
promise of riches, which you could actually play this out, and I'm sure this probably wasn't thought about by the creators of the film, but there is a sense in which late stage capitalism is an ideology without guardrails, like the capitalistic consumeristic laissez-faire drive for individualism without guardrails of morality or I would say the social good.
Concern for the other. Right. Yeah.
Itself a form of mental illness, and it has it creates a trauma that touches networks and systems of families, communities, and everything else.
Absolutely.
And I'll say this because I'm not trying to be I hate capitalism or something like that. I'm not making a point
You
about
socialist.
I'm not making the point about the fact that it works or doesn't work or that it's good or
Right.
bad. I'm simply saying an unmitigated capitalism says that you need to have infinite growth. And the reality is there's not infinite supply or resources.
Supplies or resources. Yeah.
So then you basically begin to rape and pillage the earth.
And there's not an infinite supply of workers.
Right.
And
So, but
communities
that's-
with which to
Yeah, but that's just kind of me waxing on it. So there's some other themes that have come out
wading into the deep in there, my friend.
Come on in, the water's fine.
Yeah. No, and I did make that, that point in my review for that wonderful Christian website that shall remain unnamed.
Because it was a really uber conservative one.
Certainly, yes, very uber conservative that wanted to, basically bash this as a Satanistic film, and I kind of basically said, well, the whispers of the Holy Trinity never recede very far from this inversion, because you're getting a picture of what God is not here.
Yeah, that's you definitely.
Give him the 20-cent word. Go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't thinking. What?
It's a very apophatic reading of theology.
Yeah, that's not a 20-cent word. It's a $20 word. Apophatic is negative theology.
$20? Man, I was undervaluing myself.
Negative theology means that you can say more about God by saying God is not. All right.
Yeah.
Every time you say God is something,
what you had to
limit God.
say. Yeah, what you had to say about that inversion of it's not self-sacrificing for the other. It's an inversion of that. It's a selfish sacrifice for the gain of yourself. And in experiencing that in the most dramatic way possible that we witnessed on the screen, you can't help but feel that whisper in the darkness that says, this certainly can't be right. Something is off. And I think the cinematography plays with that,
Oh, it does a great job. It's very unnerving.
Maybe
very
not
haunting.
necessarily the way that it frames the very ending, but framing up to that point and the just complete chaos that it had, but also just the way that it plays with the light and the darkness. Something feels off.
Well, I would say
about
something
it
feels
in the
off
end,
in the
yeah.
miniatures.
Yeah.
It's just like there's a word that I dropping right now. My Swiss cheese brain is totally in full effect, so I can't remember my
It's 11:10.
vocabulary. But there's this word that is used psychologically in psychology to describe our aversion and fear of doll faces, like these baby faces, these inanimate objects that look they're very close simulacra to the real, and there's kind of a that's why we can make stories that creep you out about these, whether it's a dummy for a ventriloquist act or a little
Right.
doll like
Or Puppet
Chucky or
Masters 1
something.
through 8,000.
It's exactly how I feel about the diorama of the house and the scenes,
Yeah.
seeing them and that small, like a 2 scale replica,
Yeah. And she's
to see
very
the people.
meticulous.
And yes, and she
And
even does the image of her daughter being decapitated. It is
it's from
odd.
a neutral it's from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, neutral perspective, right?
Oh, really? Okay. Yes, how
So I
neutral
think
can you be?
this time I think we
Yeah.
just wedded up themes in our overview and what we liked
Yeah.
about it. But are there any themes beyond what we described, or do you want to put a thumb on a bit more, or what did you enjoy? Just kind of give a quick
It's
flyby on
tough to
that.
say that you enjoyed anything about this film. So I think I'm going to land on the technical aspects of it. The camera work and the cinematography in this film is exquisite. And that's something that you wanna watch a master's class in how you film a horror film. This would be one of the films that you would show. There's at least certainly a modern film that you would show. It's a very atmospheric, very intentional about shot choices and lighting and all that stuff, and the way that it weaves into the story that's being told is pretty well done. I think that's probably the thing that I would take away the most. The thing that I enjoyed the most about this film. If you can say that you enjoyed anything, I think that's probably the safest thing that you could fall back on.
Well,
Because
I
it's
enjoyed the fact
it's a
that
tough watch. It's a tough watch.
it is. I enjoyed the fact that they took their mythology seriously. And
Yes.
so, if you really do go back to Joan's house and look in there, the symbols are the symbols of Pomain, but there's also all kinds of ancient esoteric words and incantation words around written, just to be seen. It really did study that kind of stuff well. Those
Yeah.
books aren't really popular anymore. I mean, you can go to the occult section and see some books like that, but
Yeah.
this is you see a lot of it, ancient Mesopotamia and stuff, but getting in the medieval period, this became a very European and French genre,
Yeah.
and it's really not huge anymore. And a lot of reasons is because we've reassessed what we understand of the demonic. Sometimes today in our materialistic philosophy, we tend to think that the demonic described in the ancient world had to do with mental health. And I think that certainly maybe that could be the case. I'm not closed off to the notions of the demonic. The world is, human evolution has evolved in such a way as to be able to only have a certain amount of senses because it was the most advantageous for us to survive. Colors present themselves to us in fruit so that we could basically learn that we co-adapted that this is a healthy fruit and this is a dead fruit, right? And so
Yeah.
we only see the world that's been constructed in this dynamic interplay of adaptation. We do not have it all. We have nowhere near the closest perspective of true reality here, even on this earth, let alone the cosmos, let
The
alone possible
cosmologically speaking, yeah.
universes, let alone beyond death. These are things that we just don't know, the great mystery.
Yeah.
I just say all that because I don't even know why I got into that, but it's just true, isn't
The
it?
things that
It's
you
just
liked
true.
about the film,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Well,
and
I just
you
thought
said that they were consistent with their mythology.
I wasn't that consistent that they really took it seriously. Yeah, and I thought that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
pretty cool because
they
I've
took
watched
it
a lot of
seriously.
as a theologian, I watch horror films, and I would not say I'm a demonologist or have any expertise in this genre of stuff because I don't think there's much hay to be made there academically, but
Yeah.
or practically. But just being able to do some cursory looking on, oh wow, they really took this seriously. Whereas other films,
Yeah.
just I mean, they
Yeah.
you see other movies and they're playing with the book of Revelation and they call it Revelations, and they just don't get their facts straight at all. And it's
Right,
like, oh,
right.
you guys are just sound like a
Yeah.
bunch
Well, and
of
there's plenty of mythology
dilettantes.
out there to get it right. You don't
Right.
have to be messy about it. Like you just have to, actually do your research. And there's plenty of stuff out there.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I would say if I had any, in my Hannibal's bites, which is our moment, Hannibal's
Hannibal's
bites.
bites.
Hello.
Is this Clarice? Hello, Clarice.
A moment of criticism. Take a bite out of it. You know what? There's very little to criticize about this film, um, except for the strange thing that the mom would ever say, "Take your little sister to this party," which is kind of dumb and unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that's one of them
And
because not
he's going
only,
to drink. You just looked at him and you knew it, and you said, "Well, don't drink
well, he said
now."
if he wasn't going to drink, but he's like, I got the weed. And he knew he wasn't going to drink. He knew he was going to get high. And that's okay. I'm with him. But
Under the influence, pal. It doesn't matter.
he was under the influence. I think my thing is where did her and her husband go? Because they were also out that night. So they went somewhere. Because whenever they got home, you hear off screen saying, yeah, they're both home. And she's like, oh, thank God. Where were you guys at? Where did you go? That night while you pawned off the sister to the, to the
Red Lobster. What do you care?
responsible. Right. Well, it's just one of those things that it's like, okay, you're just going to, she doesn't even look like she belongs at that party in the first place. So
Yeah,
that's
no, this is
definitely,
really nitpicky
yeah.
because we
Yeah.
really think it's well done.
Yeah.
I also thought that they did a lot to focus on knife cutting. Cutting tomatoes, cutting there's several points where cutting was just really zoomed in on. I thought, what's this going to do? This is teeing me up for something. And maybe
The
it's just a
decapitations
general,
in the end.
maybe, even though the first one comes by
Yeah.
blunt force trauma. I mean, maybe that's what it
Yeah,
is. All right.
yeah. Well, I did that. Well, the first one, she cuts the head off of the bird
But yeah, that's part
before
of the
she
ones
gets
that-
blunt force trauma to the face. No, I think the
Well,
other
and
thing
now, oh, go ahead.
the other thing I would say would be, playing off of the family trauma, and I don't know how you explore this, but the things that we keep from each other definitely cause problems. Whenever you suffer alone or despair alone, like nothing good can come from it.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about that earlier. That very thing, and I mentioned to you on the phone earlier that yeah, what is hushed up and hidden away can come back and rear its head. And I was thinking about somebody I know, on Ancestry.com. Went on and did that whole deal and found out that their father wasn't their father,
Yeah, yeah.
and found out that they had another father, and that father lived down the road from them when they were kids, and
Oh
they have
crap!
all these siblings, and they're all like grandparent age now, and it's like, holy goodness here.
That's
And
like
then what do you
world
do?
shattering. Yeah, what do you do with
It
that?
is, yeah. What do you do? So this stuff's hidden away, and then it comes out, and it affects everybody.
Yeah,
And so we're not meant to walk alone. We're not meant to deal with this alone. Trauma is real. Mental health is something to be taken seriously. It's not separate from healthcare. It is just healthcare because we are
yeah.
not
It is just
a brain
just
in a
healthcare.
vat. We are a person inside and out. So take care of yourself. Take care of
Yeah.
all of you, all of you. And when, by the way, I'm talking about this just Sundays, I reflect on a gospel text from the New Testament, and Jesus says, I come to save the sick." He takes two sick people and heals them, and so the message of salvation for Jesus is not this idea that you just get to go escape to some place called heaven that your spirit does.
Yeah.
But it's actually holistic. It's your whole body.
Yeah.
It's the all of you. The all of you is made whole. That is what God's heart is, according to the gospel, which we don't mean to preach here. That's just
Right.
something that I believe enough to say to anyone listening to take this all seriously, because all of it
And it
matters.
goes back to that. It really does go back to that whisper in the darkness here, of that and that inversion. Like it's a very stark contrast. What's that? You're hungry.
The whisper in the darkness says, I'm hungry.
Oh, right. I need head. Wait, no.
Okay, move it along. All right, listen. Hey, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here?
Where do we go? Listen, last time we talked, we said we were going to visit Hush, a newer slasher film that the woman who's being hunted is a deaf woman. It was a great take, but the problem is you can't rent that anywhere right now. No, you can't. No streaming service has it, and so we wanted to look at something else along the lines of trauma. So all these films we really looked at has really played in majorly on trauma.
Yeah.
I think in the future we're going to start pulling together. This was unintentional since we're new at this and trying it out, but in the future we're going to try to do some themes, like whether we look at a couple vampire flicks, a couple zombie flicks, or we maybe look at some horror com flicks. We're going to have some one-off shows. I'm going to
Dale
do
and Tucker vs. Evil. Wonderful.
Well, I'm gonna do an Enneagram reading of Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger, and see where they are on their Enneagram. Just for you Enneagram nerds out there, to see maybe if we can give them some advice on how they can, change their life, get rid of some
Heal
vices,
their soul, heal themselves.
heal themselves, right? Yeah. We might even reflect on some television shows, everything from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to
Your Good Lady
Midnight
Wife.
Mass. My good lady wife. He's talking about what we do in the shadows. So all these things are so good to pull up literary references, lean on the traditions of other films, bring in religion and theology and philosophy and art and pop culture, and we just like to catch all these references and play with them, because a good horror film for a good fright may be fun on a Friday night, but one that's really good, just like any piece of cinema, says something to us about the human experience. And I certainly think this one did in droves. I'm not going to watch it anytime soon.
This had despair in spades.
Despair in spades.
I
mean, what does that even mean in spades? Do you have more spades than you have heart? I don't know. Anyway, anything
trumps,
else?
I don't know. I don't really play cards very often. I play euchre. Give me some.
You're from Indiana.
I will probably not be watching this one anytime soon.
It's not a Valentine's Day film for you?
No. But yeah, I think I'm in for all of those things. I love having the conversation, and yes, some horror films can be like riding a roller coaster, and or like a good puzzle trying to figure out the unknown. But I think the highest of them leave you with something, and this one certainly did.
Yeah, and certainly in the future, I think we can ask our one listener maybe to give us suggestions of what to review. So.
Yes, one listener, we do care.
We have two listeners, our moms. All right. Well,
yes,
that's it for now, I think.
All right, brother.
Happy evening to all, and don't dream about Toni Collette banging your head on the ceiling trying to get to you while you're in the attic at all. Don't
cutting
dream
herself,
about that.
cutting her head off with a guitar string.
No, piano.
Piano string. Oh, even worse.
See you later.
All right, bye.